Hi everyone, this is Anna Finch from Finch Press Publishing. Hope everyone's had a good day. Now, I apologise for the late video, but I've been busy planning remote learning and marking students' work for the past 2 weeks. This is the first chance I've had to do anything besides work to do with teaching. I haven't been able to write. I've still got 2 chapters left to finish for my book before sending it to another editor. So this is the first time I've had to read something that isn't fanfic. And by the way, fanfic is awesome. But this is the first time I've been able to read something that isn't fanfic. And that isn't connected to my teaching. So this particular book review is a little bit different. So I'm still going to review it based on the story itself. So the quality of the story and how it can be used in the classroom. So I'm still going to do that. But what's different is that this particular book, I didn't actually know what it was until I got home. You see, there's a bookshop in Melbourne that, Robinson's Bookshop, I think, yeah, Robinson's Bookshop. They have this program called like Blind Date with a Book. They basically wrap up multiple books in coloured paper or brown paper, and they write 3 keywords on the front. Those 3 keywords are the only things you know about the story. So for example, you might have, there was one that had China, invasion, and magic on the cover. You only knew those 3 words. Okay, you don't know anything else. You can't see the cover, you can't see the blurb or the author's name. Nothing. You only have those 3 keywords to pick your story from. Because again, people, when they buy books, they're either drawn to the author, the cover, or the blurb. But generally speaking, if the author is not super popular or famous, the cover and the title, so if the cover is facing frontwise, the cover, if it draws their attention, it needs to be appropriate for the genre and all that. But if it draws the person's attention, maybe they'll read the blurb, maybe they will read the first chapter, and maybe they'll buy it after. But generally speaking, the title and the front cover are the first things that attract someone, or the spine, the hint you get of the cover from the spine and the title. Okay, most people judge based on that. That's their first reason why they pick up a book in the first place. Okay, unless they've heard something good about the book and they're interested in it and they go find it specifically, the cover's the first thing they look for. So this program basically blocks out everything that would attract you to the book. And the only thing you have to go by are those 3 keywords. Now, this particular book that I ended up picking had the words redemption, courage, and England. Now, when I saw that, I honestly thought, when I saw those 3 words, redemption, courage, and England, I honestly thought it was Guinevere's Deception, which I had seen in the bookshop, thought about buying, but didn't. Because, again, Guinevere's Deception, it's an Arthurian legend set in England. Courage, knights, maybe, connected with knights. Redemption, well, the word deception's in the title, so maybe the person gets redeemed or something at the end. So I thought it was that. So I picked that one instead of the one that said China, invasion, and magic. Got home, opened it up, and I saw a book that I knew I would not have picked up from the bookshop if I had seen the cover, because the cover did not attract my attention in any way. I generally pick up books with either interesting patterns on the cover, bright colours that attract my attention. Generally fairly simple ones. This one didn't really attract my attention. I read the blurb and I went, meh. I mean, the blurb was okay, but it didn't really attract my attention. It's what this book is. Once I read the blurb, so the blurb So the book's 3 Hours by Rosamund Lupton. I hope I'm saying her name right. Now, the book 3 Hours is basically set in a school in Somerset, so in England. There's a blizzard, and the school is under siege. And this is directly from the blurb, by the way. Children barricade themselves inside classrooms, the library, and the theatre. The headmaster lies wounded in the library, unable to help his trapped students and staff. Outside, a police psychologist must identify the gunman while parents gather, desperate for news. And in 3 intense hours, all must find the courage to stand up to evil and save the people they love. The blurb is okay, but I would not have picked this up normally. If you look at the sort of cover, again, I would not have picked this up based on the cover. But I read it because I bought it. And it was interesting. To my surprise, I actually enjoyed it. It was well written. The characters felt like real people, and the way they talked sounded like they were real people and not walking, talking stereotypes, which is really good. The themes were interesting. I hadn't read a book like that before. Overall, I found it really enjoyable. Now, I'll talk about plot first. The basic plot is because it does time jump. It starts off in the future and then you go back and then start from that point all the way back to until you get to the current present time. So it does a weird time skip. And because it is multi-POV, it's written in a third-person omniscient, I think, and it's multi-POV. So you'll have multiple POVs in the one chapter that are separated by ornamental breaks. So you may be seeing the point of view of the headmaster who's wounded and delusional from the pain, and the views his viewpoint's kind of broken up and fragmented and everything, which is realistic because people who are in pain and going into shock from blood loss are not very coherent to a student who is trying to stop the bleeding of the headmaster. So the views shift, but each viewpoint, each character that shows up, their view is it helps with the story. It's not unnecessary. There are multiple teacher POVs. There's POV from an 8 or 7-year-old boy, 7-year-old Muslim boy who's a refugee from Syria. There's a viewpoint from that little boy's brother, who's a high school student. You have a viewpoint from one of the female students trapped in a library, and a whole other range of them. But you don't get the viewpoints of the gunmen. They are a threat, and they're dangerous, but you don't see their viewpoint. You learn about the gunmen through the eyes of the students, the teachers, and the police officer, or the psychologist who's trying to work it out. There's also a viewpoint from a parent. There's like 10 POVs, I think, in this book. And you don't get any POV from the gunmen's. There are 3. At first you think there are 2, but in fact there are 3. Let's start with the plot. Now, the plot is fairly easy to follow. There's no real weird surprises and all that. Everything is built up upon and connects to the next. Every action builds tension. So this is a suspense. So it has a lot of suspense, and it does fit with the genre and the way it moves along. It works. The main part of the plot is you know that there are gunmen at the school. You eventually learn they have semi-automatic weapons, and I'm going to be talking spoilers here. Semi-automatic weapons that have been manipulated in order to become machine guns, so fully automatic weapons. Now, this book is set in England. The gun laws in England are very similar to those in Australia, meaning access to guns is fairly limited. It is difficult to get a gun license. You have to go through multiple tests. You have to be registered. It is hard. It's not impossible, or it's near impossible to get any access to weaponry like that. Personally, I like that they've said it in England because it shows that particular threat in a different country. The fact they said it in England is interesting. It shows how, even though you have those laws, then you've still got radicalised elements in there that will still find a way around it. It probably would have been more believable if it was set in America, because a teen could literally walk into Walmart and buy an AK-47, because of the gun laws that are fairly lax. So that gun situation, not believable, at least at the beginning, and then you learn that it is a terrorist organisation that is targeting the school through one radicalised student and another student who's basically a psychopath. The way they present these two, the gunmen in the story, is interesting, because you have this person that's revealed to be a psychopath and think, okay, yeah, definitely. And you think the other gunman might be someone from the terrorist organisation, but then you eventually find out it's a student. Now, this was a student who was dismissed by the police. They didn't think he was a suspect. He had no issues with violence. Okay. He apparently had, based on what the parents have said and all that, had no longer had a friendship with the gunman, or the person who eventually became the gunman. So they didn't believe he was one of the gunmen. But they didn't even question whether or not he was a gunman, despite the fact he was not on school grounds, or he was not contactable while on school grounds. In fact, they try to shift the blame to as the Rafi, a young Syrian refugee. The police kind of suggest that because he's Muslim and he's a refugee, he escaped a war and therefore must have been radicalised. In fact, the parents in this kind of suggest that. And I like the fact that the author shows how people assume, when you hear the word terrorism, they assume that it's a person from a country that is war-torn, rather than someone who grew up in the community, who has no connection to ISIS. And I like the fact they show that, no, it's not this person. This person is a genuine refugee who was terrified, he got him and his brother out of a war-torn country, saved his brother's life. And I'm glad they did that. I'm glad they showed how people view terrorism and what they think when they hear the word terrorism. And I like the fact they turned it on its head and said, no, you've got other people in the minority groups who are radicalised, yes, but again, it's a minority. And I like the fact they show teen radicalisation for terrorist groups in a different way to popular media. It's not a young Muslim boy who's being radicalised and therefore is a stereotype. No. It's a young British Caucasian boy who has depression, who is shy, vulnerable, to a psychopath. And it shows how anyone can be radicalised. And that sort of theme and idea, and the way they've presented it, is interesting. And the fact they didn't do it through they didn't show the POV of the gunman was a smart choice. It was a smart choice. Because you don't really need to see it in the minds of the people perpetrating the violence in order to get an idea about how certain things influenced them. The story was stronger because you didn't have the gunman's point of view. It was stronger because of that. Because the point is about how teen radicalization, from what I can get from this, the point is about how teen radicalization affects those around people. How does teen radicalization affect these people's friends? Because these kids who have been radicalized, they're someone's kids. They're someone's friends, and they're people. And it shows how they affect. It shows how other people are affected by this. The characters feel like real characters. So the kids actually sound like kids. The point of view of Rafi, the young Syrian boy, refugee, his point of view is interesting. It shows how the trauma of his past, from escaping a war-torn country, has affected him now. It talks about PTSD, how he doesn't trust his own mind because his PTSD can cause delusions. Things like he thought someone was following him because he heard a twig snapping. When you later find out that wasn't a twig. That was a gun being shot that had a silencer on it. And it shows how people who suffer from those illnesses may not trust their own minds or their own instincts. Okay. It shows his brother, Bassi, who is a young boy that is traumatized, who just wants his brother hiding in the shed. And is like worried because of the animals, and he's like 7 or 8, and he's worried because he's got a game on his phone where he has to feed the farm animals, and he doesn't want to turn off the app for the game because he doesn't want the animals to starve. It shows a nice, kind young boy who's innocent, and it shows how the violence has affected him. You see the trauma through his eyes, and how brother is a hero to him. You see how the community responds to the violence. Okay, you see a parent whose child has been radicalized, a parent who realizes that the kid that they raised, who has slowly withdrawn from them, is the one behind the shooting. You see the horror, the realization at the fact that there is no way the police can talk her son down, and the realization that her son's going to die. They will kill him. You see how people are affected by this. Okay, you see how people can fall victim to psychopaths, to terror organizations, and it's realistic in the way they portray it. At least the way that it affects people. So it's really well done. I really liked this book. As a book for enjoyment, 5 stars, definitely. And I'm definitely going to leave a review on Goodreads because this is really good. The themes are interesting. And I like the way they present the idea that anyone can be radicalized, not just people who come from traumatic backgrounds. And I like how they show normal people can be radicalized. And I like how they address the issues of trauma in this. So I definitely would give it 5 stars for enjoyment. The way it ended was kind of abrupt. I read the final line. I'm like, okay, so the teacher's now in the ambulance. I'm like, okay, what's going to happen next? Turn the page. Acknowledgements. Like, no, I wanted more. So I actually wanted to know more. Like, what happened to the third gunman? He's like stalking the other characters, but that third gunman never shows up. That third gunman doesn't have a name. So yeah, for enjoyment, definitely 5 stars. Definitely, hands down. For curriculum, I definitely do recommend it. For high school curriculum, for English, definitely recommend it. For probably year, I would say year 8 to year 10. But it would be good for year 11 as well. The language itself is fairly easy to understand. There are very little difficult words in this. The plot and characters are easy to understand and follow. The themes themselves are interesting. Particularly, you can apply this for year 11, maybe year 10. The way they present minority groups is interesting. The way they present the idea of radicalisation and how it affects others is interesting. So I would definitely recommend it for high school. I wouldn't give this to anyone below year 8 simply because of the content. But content-wise, maybe year 10. This would probably year 10 and 11 would probably be the best bet for this book. So senior, like end of middle school. I think in America it's end of middle school, start of high. No, I'm trying to think, when does middle school end? I think middle school ends in America in our year 9. So this isn't like high school, like junior year maybe. The storyline would fit because these are issues that are relevant today and that people need to understand, because it's important to realize that anyone could be radicalized, not just people who've experienced trauma. The person who was radicalized in this story was a normal kid with normal problems, no history of violence in any respect. Shy, bullied. Okay, a normal kid that ended up becoming a gunman. So I think that sort of story fits well, and it does address issues in the way people treat minorities, particularly the way people in power view minority groups. So for curriculum, I would recommend it. Now, I don't know, because this book was written, let me get the date. I think the book was written last year. No, actually, no, published this year. So it literally only came out 5 months ago. It would have come out only a couple of months ago. So it's a brand new book. So there would not be any resources, really. So things like chapter summaries. Audiobooks, I don't know about. But there wouldn't be many, or if any, resources for this book available online, because it is a very new book. So if a school does use this for the curriculum, it would need to create its own chapter summaries, its own theme analysis, okay, character notes, things like that for the book, for the students, okay, because there's not any available. But because it is published by an imprint of Penguin House, it may be possible for them to find some basic ones, but because this book isn't super popular, at least in Australia, I doubt there would be any resources available for it. But still, if you think it would be a good idea to use this book for school, I do recommend it. I'll probably give it 2.5 stars out of 5 for curriculum, simply because there's no resources. It's a good book. The kids would engage with it, particularly the higher level kids. The storyline's interesting, the characters are interesting and relatable. People will want to know what happens next. But there's no resources available, and it is a bit long. And if there is no audiobook available, then students with lower literacy levels will struggle. I know that in some of my classes, or at least in my other school, there were kids reading at primary school level. So when I say primary school, I mean like grade 2 level, when they're in year 9, so middle school, or kids who can't read, and they would struggle. Or in the case of kids who can't read, they would not be able to read it at all because they can't read. And if there is no audiobook available for them, they would not be able to do it. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. If you like this review, hit the like button down below, and if you want to be notified of when I upload, please press the subscribe button. Now, until everything goes back to normal with this, my schedule for videos are going to be very erratic. I will try to upload once a week if I can, or at least once every 2 weeks until this situation is resolved. My next video will either be another book review, or it will be a vlog about my progress on editing my novel. When I get to editing my novel, I will do a review on Fictionary, so a program to do with plot structure, and Pro Writing Aid, so a grammar checker. Okay, so I will actually review those in the near future, hopefully, and I'll review some other programs once I get to using them. Hope everyone stays safe, and yeah, just keep each other safe. Stay at home if you can. Yeah, wish you all the best.